All right, today we have a special guest on the channel, The Guardian, and this last weekend was the Mr. Classic tournament. And The Guardian, you were actually there on the ground, and you were able to take down which which part of the tournament? Can you tell us more about that?
Yep, so Mr. Classic weekend has a couple different events. Kind of like the main event is the invitational tournament, where that is 8 players uh, in a basically single elimination tournament. So
Hmm.
three rounds, and they're fighting for the Mr. Classic championship belt, which my
Hmm.
brother Jaden won last year in the inaugural Mr. Classic. And then Mr. Brian Jonesy, took down this year. So um, last year I finished second in that event. This year I got knocked out in the first round, so it was kind of a bummer, but it's a really
Yeah.
fun event. And then aside from that, they also do a classic booster draft. So we draft all of the cards up to the rotation sets, except for Warriors, since those packs
Oh
are
wow.
pretty hard to find, pretty rare.
So you're
Um,
cracking Angel Wars
and
packs or something.
we were cracking Angel Wars packs, and contrary to
Crazy.
popular belief, there are some valuable Angel Wars cards for a booster draft. Definitely some
Yeah.
cards that can impact the game. So I always enjoy doing Angel Wars with classic drafts. So that was the Friday. Those were the Friday events. Oh, then a Type two-player event, which was the classic format. So that's all the cards,
Hmm.
other than
Hmm.
banned cards, of course. So those 3 events, I should say, were Friday night or Friday, and then Saturday was the Type one two-player classic, the one that everyone could
Right.
participate in, and that is the event that I was fortunate enough to win.
Amazing.
Uh, yeah, it was a great event. 6 rounds, lots of redemption, lots of great games. Yeah,
Hmm.
and I feel like I played pretty well, and I got a little lucky in a couple situations, and yeah, I managed to take it down.
It was really cool to see you on camera doing this too. I'll post the video in the description where you can watch the gameplay, but let's talk a little bit about the deck. Where did this deck that you play first originate? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I think it was back last fall, probably around September-ish, and basically the big deck for this, last season, and then, at the start of this season was obviously the Matthew-based New Testament decks, where
Yeah.
basically your people are just trying to go all in on Matthew on turn one. And I was like, all right, I need to find a deck to kind of counter this strategy. Like, I tend to be more of a person that likes to see what, a lot of what most people are playing or what strategies are using, and then try to find something that kind of counters that.
Right.
And I discovered that, I mean, this wasn't a new thing. Herdsmen of Gerar is kind of the key evil character. Um, and I
Oh
actually
yeah.
didn't play a whole lot during when Lineage of Christ came out, so I was not even super familiar with that card and how powerful it could be until I started seeing some other people talk about it as like the way to counter a turn one Matthew. And so when I kind of discovered this card for myself. Obviously, most other people who had been uh, more involved knew about it. Um, in combination with that and the release of the KL starter decks with Murderous Command and Warrior Overtaken, I kind of started to think about, you know, what would a deck look like, or kind of like defense, I guess, would look like if I could try to always have the turn one Herdsman of Gerar to counter someone's turn one Matthew.
Yeah.
And but I build a defense around that idea. And so I kind of started with that premise,
Hmm.
and using both of those evil dominants, I kind of realized that I think, it might be a little counterintuitive if you're trying to have a specific card on turn one to run a larger deck, but I kind of decided that the deck would need to be a 57 card deck so I could have 8 dominants,
Right. Right.
and and I felt like I could put enough pieces enough kind of cards that could get to Herdsmen consistently as a turn one block, even with a 57 card deck. Because those dominants, obviously, they don't necessarily win battles. They extend battles and they give me a chance to recover, but they don't like outright win a battle like a Christian Martyr or an Angel of the Lord, or a Falling Away. So I felt like having both in just a deck with 7 dominants wouldn't quite cut it. And so I
Mhm.
decided to build it at 57, and and then the offense came a little bit later. And we'll probably talk about that next, but that was kind
Yeah.
of the first idea of the deck was the how do
Yeah.
I consistently get turn one herdsmen?
Yeah. That makes sense. Like all your evil cards love just revealing the opponent's hand and drawing a bunch of cards. Just blocking and drawing cards, it seems to be a really strong element of this deck. Got Lying
Yeah,
Prophet,
yeah,
Divining
exactly. Like
Damsel.
yep, damsel, lying prophet, and those are kind of if my opponent doesn't do a turn one Matthew, then usually I'm trying to get like a turn one damsel, a turn one lying prophet, and it's not only the drawing, but the hand knowledge is absolutely a big part of what makes it successful. Is that a lot of times I will choose to go second so that my opponent doesn't get that draw three on their first turn. Instead of them
Yeah.
getting a draw three, I'm hoping I
Yeah.
get a draw three with my block. And then I've essentially, negated their advantage of going first in terms of like, card advantage and tempo. It's kind of the
Hmm.
idea. Now, that doesn't always happen. Obviously,
Hmm.
with some of the Matthew decks and decks with like the Resurrection and all these decks that can go just kind of completely nuts on turn one, sometimes they get so far ahead that, even if I draw a bunch with herdsmen, I'm still not ahead. I'm hopefully just, at
Yeah.
parity at that
You're just
point.
keeping up with them, huh?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. That makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about the offense here. How did this offense come to be? You said you've liked hand knowledge, and this deck utilizes a lot of it in the offense, especially.
Yeah, so the first kind of cards that I decided I wanted to use were a couple of enhancements, which would be Teaching in Parables and First Sacrifice. So these are cards that let me look at the opponent's hand, and then with Teaching, I can reserve a card, or First Sacrifice gets to underdeck an evil card. And so basically, this gives me an opportunity to know what's exactly in their hand and hopefully take away their most impactful evil card, and then
Yeah.
make my attack accordingly. And, um, and then later on, when Israelites Rebellion released and 20 shekels came into the card pool, that was just another great card that gave me some hand knowledge, and then has a couple other effects as well that I'll kind of get into. But before 20 shekels was a part of the deck, I actually had a little high priests package, so that I could use Urim and Thummim. So that's a card that also lets you look at the hand and then activate a different artifact. So I was using a lot of um, like control artifacts, some of the curses like a wasting disease or a confusion of mind, things that kind of limited what the opponents could do. So that was kind of the control side um, of the deck. Um, once 20 shekels, once I realized just how good it was, I kind of realized I didn't need Urim and Thummim, and so I actually moved away from that part of the deck. But the hand knowledge was always the big piece. And so
Yeah.
from there, I kind of started thinking, okay, how can I best utilize the hand knowledge? And I kind of decided on a choose the blocker based offense. This worked out pretty well because two of the key heroes were Zaccheus and Elijah, which are two very strong choose the blocker heroes. Zaccheus can either choose the blocker or reserve an evil card, so he's got some
Hmm.
flexibility.
Hmm.
And then Elijah is protected from discard, so he also has something else aside from just choosing the blocker.
Yeah.
And since my first two enhancements, one was gold, then one had green, it just made
Yeah. This is
sense to
perfect.
start. yeah, just to start with these two heroes. Excuse me, and then I kind of built it from that base with I've used Deborah, the gold green Deborah, and then originally had gold green Samuel from Cloud of Witnesses. And so basically, it was the idea was that I wanted um, all of my heroes to be able to play as many of the enhancements uh, in my deck as they could, you know, so that either they were a green hero or a gold hero or both. Like my Samuel and my Deborah could play teaching and parables,
Yep.
or they could play for sacrifice. Those were kind
Yep.
of some of those were like the first four heroes that I kind of started with as kind of the foundation.
Okay. Great. Um, let's move on to the next question then. Let's see. Why did you kind of decide to call this deck GoldenEye?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So for the longest time, I didn't really have a name for the deck, and then it was actually when you had asked me about doing a deck tech with it and asked me what to name it, and I was like, oh, I probably should come up with a name for it because I'm using it quite a bit. It's kind of become my favorite deck, and so I went through a lot of different name ideas, and I settled on GoldenEye because it's gold based and it likes to look at your hand. So golden eye
Yeah,
kind of fit.
I love that.
Um, John Hendricks, um, he likes to call the deck part-time Moses because I like to use the little trick with the Cloud Moses, having him in territory to stop my opponent from using territory class and lost soul abilities. But then on my turn I will bounce him 20 shekels, and so for I get to do that kind of stuff on my turn. Use my powerful territory class enhancements,
Right.
and
Right.
then when I'm done, I put Moses back down. So
Back on the clock. Get back to it.
yep, yeah,
I love that.
give Moses a little break and then put him back to work.
Before I forget,
So
so the deck that you like to use, you took this to classic and you added a couple of classic cards. You only added what? Ehud and Simeon? The rest are just
yeah,
rotation
so
cards?
I added three classic cards. So I took out Deborah and Jairus out of the main deck, and I put in Simeon and Ehud. Um, Simeon is obviously a gold hero, and he bans to not only most of my offense, because a lot of them are prophets, but most people are playing at least a couple prophets in their own decks. And so Simeon being able to, ban to an opponent's character, um, whether it's like a captain of the host for some fight by the numbers banding,
Wow.
or
Yeah.
a hero
Seems strong.
that draws cards like a John the Fisherman, draw a couple cards if I need to. Just a really flexible hero that plays most of my, powerful enhancements. Obviously, he
Hmm.
doesn't play for sacrifice, but he plays teaching in parables, plays amazing faith. And so those are just, he just fit right in. Kind of the same with Ehud. He being a choose the blocker hero that can play all of my strong gold enhancements just made a ton of sense and actually became quite crucial in my final round game when my Zaccheus got captured. I believe my opponent used a stocks to capture my Zaccheus, and I ended up using Ehud for several rescues where, like, I looked at their hand, I knew exactly what they had,
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
knew who to choose with Ehud, and I got some good rescues just where I didn't have to risk or I didn't have to like play a dominant because I didn't have to because I knew that they didn't have a negate or something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
So
so that's kind
clutch.
of the powerful part of the hand knowledge is just knowing exactly, like what's the minimum resources I need to spend and still get this lost soul, and that just lets me save resources for future battles. And then Haman's plot, the classic Haman's plot, excuse me, I put it in reserve because it's kind of an awesome card, and I loved using it back in the day when I could run a Type 2 deck with four or five of them. And I didn't end up ripping one, so kind of disappointed. I was hoping there'd be a good opportunity to rip one. I've got a few left over in my collection from the old days of Classic, but
Hmm.
I did not get an opportunity
Oh,
to use
don't
that
worry.
in this tournament. Just got to save
It-
for next year, I guess.
yeah. I guess that was a missed favorite moment from Mr. Classic, but do you have any other favorite moments from this Mr. Classic that you really liked?
Yeah, so there was, you know, kind of the obvious one, and kind of like, one of the reasons that I made the 15-hour drive with my brother and with Gabe for most of it was, seeing all the awesome people that are there. Um, it's great to get together, and a lot of the people and kind of the redemption community. A lot of times you only get to see them once a year at nationals. Mr. Classic is another opportunity for people to get together, from all over the
Hmm.
U.S. So that's kind of the main thing. Is just obviously playing is fun. It's fun to compete, to share deck ideas, but seeing everyone is awesome. And then as far as the gameplay, I think in the first round of booster draft, it was a really tough table. It was myself, um, Brian Jones, Josh Potratz, and John Hendricks at one of the
Mm.
tables, and that was so it really, four really, really good players, and it was a tight game. It was coming down to the end. I was behind in terms of like, the souls I had rescued, and like I was behind a turn, and then
Yeah.
first, I think it was Josh went after a rescue against Brian, and Brian played a Great Morning, a card that makes the opponent skip their next battle phase, and then a battle winner, Paul's Girdle, to bounce the rescuing hero. So basically, he stopped Josh for 2 turns, and then because I was next, because I was behind, like I was behind a soul behind everybody else. I was able to, nobody stopped me from rescuing. I think I picked up one maybe from Josh or something.
Wow.
So then I was in the kind of tied, but I was now a turn behind still. Brian goes, rescues against me for the winning soul. I can't stop him. Josh has the women's falling away to stop Brian from winning on
No
that turn.
way.
He takes one away from Brian, puts Brian back to 3. But then I have to give one up, so Brian goes back to 4.
That sounds crazy.
So then the turn passes to John. He's already at 4. He goes to rescue against Brian. And again, Brian has the exact same 2 card combo. Great Morning, followed up by Paul's Girdle to basically make John skip, to lose the battle and skip his next rescue attempt. And so suddenly I go from being, a lost soul and a turn behind everybody to I'm going to get the next chance to win because Josh is skipping his turn.
Oh man.
And so Josh just basically passes as soon as his turn. He draws 3 and passes. Um, and then it's back to me, and now I have got a chance to go for the win. I go after, I think it was Brian again. He does not have Paul's Girdle or Great Morning, but he
Yeah,
does have
yeah.
a Death of Unrighteous to stop me. And the game ended up
No.
being a 4-4-4-4 tie.
Oh wow. That
So
sounds
it
so
was
fun. That's definitely a match to remember, huh?
Oh, it was so like it's probably the most fun like multiplayer tie game I've ever been a part of just because it was
Dude.
like it was just so crazy and like yeah, like there was definitely frustrating moments. Like that was actually the second time in the game that I had gotten Death of Unrighteous used against me, which is just
Ugh.
a crazy card for booster. Like there's
Yeah.
literally not many ways to stop that from happening.
No, no.
And so that was not fun, but the game overall was just an awesome game. And in
Hmm.
one sense, I'm kind of glad it was a tie because it really showed like, yeah, we had 4 good players who had drafted 4 pretty decent decks, as decent as you can get in the
Yeah,
classic
it
only
sounds like it.
draft.
Great
And
morning and the death of unrighteous falling away like crazy.
yeah, just a crazy, crazy match, and it honestly felt like, we all deserved at least a point from that game. Like no one no one got shut out of the points, so yeah, it was good.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that moment. That's beautiful. I have another question for you. How did you prepare for this particular tournament? It's a different type of format that's not T1 rotation, but how did you actually prepare for something like this?
Yeah, so for the Um, um, like obviously for the booster draft, you don't really, prepare in a sense. The booster draft is, just having years of knowledge and experience of playing with the classic cards. Um, for the Mr. Classic event, the invitational tournament, I didn't do a ton of preparation in terms of like, testing my deck or going through different
Yeah.
lists. But I spent a lot of time thinking about, okay, what are other people likely to be playing? What are um, the different options that I have that I think will go best against that?
Yep.
And then also what would I feel most comfortable playing? So it was more like a theory crafting
Hmm.
as people call it, or just kind of more of a thought process for me than necessarily like, building a bunch of decks and testing them all, or trying to, you know, do a bunch of like, test draws with various decks and various combinations. Jaden and I worked a little bit together initially. We just kind of had like a little brainstorming session. But then we ultimately, built our decks, on our own. We weren't like
Right.
building the
Right.
decks together and playing the exact same list or anything like that. Although we did end up on a pretty similar offense. We both ended up using the Throne of David based offense, but even with that, we had it in
Right.
like two different kind of variants, you could say. Um,
That was for like
yeah,
the Scroots part of the tournament, right?
yeah. Well, that was for the invitational. Yeah, Scroots. Yep.
Right.
Actually,
Okay.
that was the part that I wish I had done more prep was with the roots cards. I do wish I had done a little bit more. I don't even know like if game time with them, but uh, really kind of thinking about okay, which ones are people likely to play. In my game against Josh, that I got knocked out in the first round. I made a pretty bad misplay
Hmm.
um, with him having the color guard Lost Soul from Roots.
Yeah.
Um, I remember playing against and playing with the color guard Lost Soul way back in the day, and it's like
Oh yeah.
oh he doesn't that you need to have a sight for it to work, and so
Right. Right.
the big play back in the day was you run a color guard Soul and you run a purple sight to protect against Authority of Christ, the card that I had in my game against
Yeah.
Josh, and he
Yeah.
didn't have a purple sight, so yeah, my Authority of Christ is fine. Well, no, that's that's not how the new one works. The new one's a little bit better. You don't need to have the sight to
Right.
keep
What
your
your brain was
evil guy.
probably thinking in that moment is probably recalling the image, the color guard. They're the same card. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna go for
Yep.
this because he doesn't have it.
Doesn't have the purple sight, so
Yeah.
his evil guys are unprotected, and so yeah, that's probably kind of my one
Hmm.
regret or my one like kind of in hindsight, I wish I had spent more time
Yeah.
um, thinking about the roots cards and especially the lost souls. Like can't really predict what everyone's going to run as far as like an offense and a defense, but with the lost souls, I think you can make a pretty strong case that the lost souls you could have a pretty good idea that people were going to be running like color guard with a like a mono brigade defense because that is just really good against some of the classic strategies like a Authority of Christ promo.
Yep. Okay. Let's move on to another question. If you had to choose a card from your deck to be the MVP of your deck that won the tournament on Saturday, what card would you choose?
It's probably got to be 20 shekels. Just having that every turn and knowledge. Obviously I had to include other cards, um, shipwreck and three woes to make sure that I could, get rid of a protection fortress or, negate a hero that was protecting my opponent's hand. But at the end
Yep.
of the day,
Yep.
those cards they don't, they're still useful in other situations, but if I don't have the 20 shekels, having the hand knowledge just lets you optimize pretty much every play you make on your turn for as long as you have that hand knowledge. Obviously you attack and they block, they could draw three random cards. You don't know what they could draw, but whenever you have full knowledge of your hand, basically make every optimal play. Um, from your side. Now it doesn't mean I always did.
Right.
There's so many, kind of decision trees that you can get into with hand knowledge, that, even myself having played, a lot of years and then a lot of games with this deck in particular, and it can still be tricky, especially with, time
Hmm.
limits and making sure that
Hmm.
I'm not taking too long,
Right.
to come up with the right decision.
Yeah, I was thinking about a match we'd played earlier this week where you'd played 20 shekels, and after the game you were thinking about it and you'd found the line that would have actually broken through and got you the win
Yep.
there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah,
But
I knew exactly what was in your hand, and I still didn't, that there was a line that I would have had to, yeah, to get past your defense, and I just missed it. It was not
yeah,
a super obvious thing, but that's why it's so important, to anyone to, more than building, the super strongest deck is, finding a deck that you're comfortable with, and then getting really used to playing with it and figuring out the different lines of play that you can take with it.
yep. As a newer player, I took this deck out for a spin, kind of maybe an earlier iteration of it, and I was struggling a lot because I had no idea what the cards in my hands, cards in the opponent's hands were actually doing. And I feel like a lot of
Mhm.
the power in this deck revolves around that knowledge about how do these cards interact with each other, how can I navigate and make the best attacks possible.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a tricky one to play because you not only need to know what your cards are doing, but you need to know, obviously you're not allowed to like study the opponent's hand for, you know, very long. You get, 30 seconds or whatever the limit is,
30
and you have
seconds.
to be able to get, yeah, you have to be able to figure out in that short time, right, what are my opponent's options and how can I counter those?
This kind of stuff makes me love Redemption. It's like so complicated, so interesting, and I don't know. This card, 20 shekels, makes me love the game Redemption even more.
Yeah, and I think, well, and even we talked about the hand look part of it, but even the bounce and the play is so crucial. Like, I guess we did talk about like bouncing Moses,
Yep.
but there were games where, actually, I think it was the game against you where I was bouncing your Daniel. You put more brigades in your hand, so I could draw more with Matthew. I've got a different version of the deck where I tried a New Testament offense, like bouncing your Daniel to put more brigades in your
Yeah,
hand so I could
that was
draw with
crazy.
that. And then specifically with the GoldenEye version, playing characters out and like playing, if you're trying to hold Deceiver so that you can, block with whatever evil character is best. Well, if I put him out with 20 shekels and then rescue a Zaccheus and reserve him, and that was your only blocker, then I just pick up a free soul for, basically no
Yeah.
resources.
He just activated an artifact and just walked into the end zone. That was crazy.
Yep.
All right. This last part here is just an open mic. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about? It's been on your mind, or anything you want to say to the audience here?
Yeah, no, I just really appreciate people like yourself that are doing all this great content. I've been fortunate to have been on. I did a podcast with Threshing Floor, did an interview with Rob M, and now doing one with you. I've done some live stream games with my brother Jaden on the Redemption with Jaden channel, and just really think it's cool to see the game getting so much, um, not just exposure, but just resources for new players, interesting content, giving players ideas. I think it's going to benefit the community so much. I think
Hmm.
back to years and years ago when all we kind of had was the Cactus Forum message board, which was great. We could discuss things, whether it was redemption or off-topic stuff like sports or other games, deck ideas, tournament reports. And actually, tournament reports were a big thing,
Yeah.
kind of way back then, where people would, kind of detail, tournaments that were maybe sometimes 6, 7, 8, 9 rounds long. If it was nationals, it could be like a 10-round nationals tournament. And I always loved reading those reports and just kind of, uh, trying to visualize how those games played out and how they kind of went back and forth and all that. So, and now to have not necessarily a tournament report video, but like videos with like,
Yeah.
you know, Lackey Grand Prix games and Zoom tournament games and you know test games with you know testing out new decks and deck techs and it's just yeah it's the content availability has come so far. Land of Redemption having awesome articles. I've been fortunate enough to do a few articles for Land of Redemption, and yeah, I just really appreciate everyone who's contributing you know, to kind of highlight how awesome this game is and how fun it can be.
Especially your brother Jaded. I know he's done so much for the game as far as making content. I really appreciated his streaming of the gameplays. So we didn't have to read like a forum post about the game. We could watch it in real time as it was happening.
Right, yeah, yeah, like streaming, yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, you know, you don't really need a tournament report to read if you can actually just go back and watch it, either in real time or later on. Get to see kind of the, you know, the in the moment, the big plays, and um, yeah, it makes me wish that booster draft multiplayer game had been streamed because
Oh man.
there was so much. You know, clutch plays and all that. But yeah, it was it was a crazy game. And you know, honestly, like with classic booster, you know, you're generally not going to have a very like highly optimized deck. So a lot of the game is just kind of comes down to like because it's obviously it's multiplayer. You know, you're giving up free souls to the player who's like in third place or fourth place, and you're trying to slow down the guy who's out in front. And so that was what most of that game was, where you know one person would get out in front, and then the next person would maybe get a free one, and then you try to block the guy who's in front. And so, in some sense, it's a little bit like, oh, I hate giving up a free lost soul when I feel like I could block, but then I can't block the next guy. You know, which is just
Yeah.
kind of multiplayer in general. But then at the end, when it's like, all right, everyone's got to be stopped, and people are just coming up with you know, different blocks, you know, whether it's the death of unrighteous or the great mourning and the falling away. It's just like the game came down to the wire and it got really exciting, almost like a you know like a football game that's been kind of like you know meh for the whole game, and then the last 5 minutes of
Yeah.
the
The
game is
fourth
you know
quarter just
everything goes
heats up.
crazy. Yeah, it was awesome.
I actually have the deck list here. Let me see if I can put it on the screen without blowing your face up. Is this the deck that won the draft?
Yeah, so we're still not really sure how that happened. So for the viewers at home, generally you don't want to draft 20 evil characters or however many he's got there, and only 6 heroes. We're still not sure how Hendrix managed to win this tournament having only 6 heroes.
Right.
And the craziest part is in round three, we were at the final table. Basically, whoever won that game was going to win the tournament. He went for his first rescue against me with Phineas, one of his biggest heroes, but he had nothing to play on him.
No
And
teal enhancements. Yeah.
no teal enhancements. And because I had played John in the first round, I kind of suspected that he had no teal enhancements. And I basically blocked him with the big evil character that had first strike and killed his Phineas turn one. So he's basically played most of the game with 5 heroes, and he still managed to somehow squeak out the 5 souls to get the win.
Crazy. Congratulations, Mr. Hendricks, for that.
Yep, yep.
And thank you, Mr. Guardian, for joining us here on the Babooni Chim show today.
Yeah, no, it's great. Again, I really appreciate all the stuff that you're contributing to the Redemption community. Just really makes the game more fun when you have access to more things like your videos and other things like that to keep the hype train rolling, as they say.
Yeah. Nationals 2024. Here we come.
Here we go.
All right. Goodbye, everybody. See you next time.